The only thing that we're interested in is putting money in your wallet. If you want to bet the fights, if you want to have a little bit of action, you are in the right place. With my partner, Ian Parker, I am Brett Okamoto.
We're ready to rock between our parlays, our props, our straight picks. It's time to make money. Let's go.
Let's go is right. UFC Fight Night, and the UFC is back at the Apex this Saturday night in Las Vegas with a light heavyweight main event between Jan Blachowicz, the former champion, taking on Aleksandar Rakic. Interesting main event to break down between the former champ and a surging contender in the UFC's 205-pound division. So to talk about that from a betting perspective, I am Brett Okamoto, joined as always by my partner and good friend, Ian Parker, who has a little bit of bragging to do because before we get to the fights this weekend, we got to look back at UFC 274. Ian, tell us how you did over there in Phoenix.
We had a pretty solid night. You know what? It's always good to get back on track, hitting the majority of our plays, being in the profit. You know, of course, we did have Justin Gaethje in the main event, which was close. But let's take a look at what we hit. We did take Lupi Gonzalez. We lost to Norma Dumont by decision, although, to be honest with you, I thought we won that fight. But hey, the judges are the judges, right? Royval Schnell fight not to go the distance. That one was never in question. Royval looked fantastic. Rose and Carla, I don't mean to laugh, but that might have been the easiest bet of 2022 and possibly the last 30 years. And we did fall off on the Gaethje play. Look, if you knock down Charles Oliveira twice, you know what's going to happen. You're just going to lose. That's just the way it goes, I guess, these days.
Yeah, the only guy in the UFC where it's actually a bad thing when you knock him down because you can't follow him to the floor. So we were winners last weekend. Here's someone who was not. Oh no, Drake. Again, he's making big. I feel like our guy Drake is chasing a little bit because what he had Masvidal earlier in the year, and now he takes Gaethje. Total stake 550 large. Ian, have you ever had a loss that bad?
No, I don't have Drake type of money. Maybe someday. But look, I give credit to him for putting it out there and with the transparency. And you know what, though? We don't ever see the follow-up tweet, whether he wins or loses. I would like to get a little reaction on him. He was probably going crazy when Oliveira got knocked down that second time.
Well, I'll tell you what, I'm going to have my people reach out to his people, tell him start watching the show. Yes, we got Gaethje wrong, but had he just been putting $550,000 on our best bets, he'd be a happy man this weekend with a little bit of extra cash. So without further ado, let's get to the fights this weekend. It is a 6-fight main card. You can find it on ESPN Plus and ESPN2. Again, it is headlined by Jan Blachowicz taking on Aleksandar Rakic. You got Ryan Spann taking on Ian Cutelaba. Davey Grant taking on Luis Smoka. Caitlin Chookagian, after signing a new deal with the UFC, taking on Amanda Ribas. That's a big fight in the strawweight division. You see both of them are ranked there. Frank Camacho, Manuel Torres, Jake Hadley, Alan Nascimento. And let's talk about the main event right off the bat, Ian. You got Jan Blachowicz taking on Aleksandar Rakic. It's an interesting fight to me. This fight was supposed to take place in March. Blachowicz pulled out due to a neck injury. Obviously, he's coming off of that loss to Glover Teixeira. Jan was that guy who was the dog. We weren't giving him the respect. Put some respect on the man's name. And then we finally did, and he went out and laid an egg against Glover Teixeira. So what are you doing here in his comeback fight? He is back in a familiar spot, an underdog, plus 160, Rakic minus 190.
Well, personally, I don't really understand the underdog situation here. You know, one loss and it's to Glover and for the title. To me, that doesn't really scream underdog. You know, beating Luke Rockhold, beating Dominic Reyes, beating Israel Adesanya. It's almost like it didn't count for anything. And we're looking at Aleksandar Rakic, and I'm a little confused with him. After that crazy knockout to Jimmy Manua, you know, he's had a couple of split decisions. He had a decision over Anthony Smith. But nothing has screamed here dominance. Nothing has screamed here that his style, in my opinion at least, is going to give something that Jan Blachowicz hasn't seen before. You know, is he going to take Jan Blachowicz down? Is he going to grapple him? Because I think this is going to be more of how he fought against Thiago Santos. I don't think he's going to want to feel the power, you know, of Jan Blachowicz. And for me, I think Jan Blachowicz just has more ways to win. And look at that. Most wins as an underdog, 8. That's a scary thing right there. I think the value between the two, if you were to place a bet, outside of where we're going to go with it, because I truly do like over 2.5 rounds here. I just think that Jan Blachowicz would be the value play if you were to pick one side or the other.
Interesting, man. So when you say you don't understand the underdog role here, let me ask you, Did you expect Jan Blachowicz to be the favorite when these odds came out?
Yeah. Yeah, I really did. And based
Wow.
as a champion, well, you know what? Look, he was a champ not too long ago. One loss out of his last 3 or 4. Look, he had a great win over Dominic Reyes. He had a phenomenal win over Luke Rockhold. And Israel Adesanya might not have been the most exciting fight, but it was smart. What do we talk about when you fight Israel Adesanya? Wrestle him, put him on his back. And Jan Blachowicz was big enough and strong enough and good enough to do it, along with landing really strong leg kicks. Rakic is a guy that is explosive, throws combinations-ish in his fight against Thiago Santos. It was almost borderline Rose Carla too, and I hate to keep bringing that type of fight up. It was boring, it was lackluster, and he just tried to play the point game. And Jan Blachowicz has seen all that. I think for Jan Blachowicz, he has to treat this fight the way he fought Israel Adesanya, and that is to put Aleksandar Rakic on his back, steal some rounds, and watch out for that right high kick of Rakic where he likes to step forward and throw like he did against Manua. So if I were to pick a side, I think the value is absolutely on the underdog in Blachowicz, who's the former champ. But for me, Brett, I like this fight going over 2.5 rounds. I think there's going to be very conservative striking in round 1.
Unbelievable that you think that Jan should be the favorite. Not only does he open as the underdog, but you saw the line movement. It's actually going in Rakic's favor. So a lot of people like Rakic. And by the way, dude, easy on the Esparza Rose 2 comparisons. Like, that was a historically bad fight. So I didn't think that Rakic versus Sana was that bad. So take it easy a little bit with the comparisons. Final thing on this fight, though, is there anything that you could be missing on Rakic? Because like I said, the line is moving in his favor. He has been a favorite in every single one of his UFC fights. So Vegas odds makers clearly like what they're seeing in this guy. Is there anything that we could be missing about him? Talk about just Rakic for me for a bit.
Yeah, look, I don't know if there's anything we're missing yet because I don't think we've seen enough of him. He hasn't fought in a year. He hasn't been overly active. And he seems to just, I don't think he's evolved. I don't think he's improved anywhere. I think he's a very good fighter. I'm not trying to take away from his skill set. Excellent striker. He's, I don't think he's that killer that we saw in the Manua fight or on his way up. It just, for me, until he really cements himself, if he gets a knockout a year over Blachowicz, I don't care what round it is. If he goes in there and dominates him and doesn't just point fight and really picks him apart, then yes, he will have my full support as the favorite here. But a year ago, that fight against Thiago Santos, that judge's decision could have went the other way. He really was very, very hesitant with everything. And I understand Thiago Santos has power, but we've talked about Thiago Santos with his knees, and he's just a different type of Santos. So we saw he respected the power there. I think he's going to respect the power of Blachowicz. Maybe Rakic surprises us and puts Blachowicz on his back and goes to work, since we saw a little bit of the hole in the game when Blachowicz fought Glover. It's just hard for me to really be confident in such a number with him where he hasn't had a dominant performance since Manua. And yes, against Anthony Smith, it was a unanimous decision again, but it wasn't like Anthony was ever in real danger. So for me, I'm not taking a side in this bet. I think over 2.5 is the way to go, but I think the value is definitely in the former champ. Could be wrong.
Yeah, I mean, Ian, I think you got to jump on a plus 160 with Blachowicz, man. If you're telling me that you think he should be the favorite and he is plus 160, I think you got to take something there. And I don't disagree with you. I mean, this line surprises me a little bit as well. And Rakic, since he's kind of moved up in competition, he hasn't really shown a lot of finishing power. I think his last finish was about 3 years ago. So he was getting some finishes earlier in his UFC career. Jan is a tough guy to finish. I mean, Izzy was in there with him for 5 rounds, and Izzy really couldn't get off on him. And I know that that's a little bit of a different story because of the size differential, but Izzy is one of, if not the most talented strikers in the sport. And Jan is a tough guy to hurt. Jan is a tough guy to finish. So I agree with you. The value seems to be, to me, on Jan Blachowicz. Let's move to the co-main event. We'll stay at 205 pounds. Ryan Spann taking on Ion Cutelaba. The oddsmakers like Cutelaba here, minus 220. Ryan Spann is a guy who has shown a lot of promise, but when he stepped up in competition, the results have not been good. He's been finished inside the first round against guys like Johnny Walker, Anthony Smith. What do you see in this fight? Could there be some value on Spann at plus 180?
Normally I would like to say yes in this type of situation where you have a guy in Spann who should use his wrestling, who should put Cutelaba on his back. But we saw Cutelaba in his last fight go all 3 rounds against Devin Clark, who's a very strong wrestler as well. So the question of cardio, maybe it's out the window. Maybe what he's doing with Eric Nixick at Extreme Couture is exactly what he needed to answer that, because we know he brings intensity. We know he's a good striker. But it was always the question of cardio and the defensive takedowns. Ryan Spann also doesn't really fight too intelligently. He gets in these brawls. He knocked down Johnny Walker, and then he got knocked out himself. You know, he had a split win over Sam Alvey. Questionable. A lot of people thought Alvey won that fight. So for me, I think this fight goes under 1.5. I don't see how either one of these guys don't go to sleep within the first X amount of minutes of this fight. We know what Cutelaba brings, and Spann's trying to prove himself. So if he doesn't establish that wrestling early, I expect that lights are going out on somebody, and I understand why Cutelaba is a 3-1 favorite. I totally get it here.
All right, so we got an over on the main event. We got an under in the co-main event. Let's move to Davey Grant taking on Luis Smoka, who, Smoka, man, he's 2-3 in his last 5, and he just has, I hate to say it this way, but sometimes he just doesn't show up. I mean, those 3 losses were all first-round finishes. You got Davey Grant, who's coming off back-to-back losses, but he's a minus 300 favorite, and if you look who he lost to, Chito Vera and Adrian Yanez, pretty good competition there. Minus 300, though? We like minus 300, or is that a bit too high?
Man, 300 is definitely too high for a straight play here on Davey Grant. Listen, I think Davey Grant, even in those losses, showed us a ton. He took that first round from Chito, you know, and I just think someone in Davey Grant, excuse me, his wrestling has gotten better, but his stand-up and his chin are ridiculous. For me, you made a great point here with Luis Smoka. He just doesn't show up. This is a guy who's always been talented, always considered. Where is he? When is he showing up? We know he's well-rounded, but then he's eating shots and he's getting flattened really quick. And I think Davey Grant possesses that power. So for me, I don't think this fight goes the distance. I think Grant gets it done by a TKO inside the distance. So that's the play I would do here, only because minus 310 is just too much in a situation where what if Smoka gets Davey Grant's back, where Smoka is good on the ground. He just, for some reason, likes to play a little dangerous and swing for the fences, and that's when he gets knocked out, and Grant's got the power to do it.
Yeah, I think moving from minus 310 to plus 105 it makes sense to me, especially like I mentioned, sometimes Smoka, when he loses, he does lose bad. So let's move to the women's flyweight division. Katlyn Chookagian, who is just, you know, sometimes I throw these, Ian, I don't know what you're going to do with this person. Katlyn Chookagian is the opposite of that. She is so consistent. She's taking on Amanda Ribas, who is 11-2 and coming in at plus 155 underdog. My question here is, I know that Ribas is good, but Katlyn Chookagian, again, just so consistent, no holes in her game. Where does Amanda win this fight? If you're looking to put something on the underdog here, what is her path to victory when you look at this fight?
For Amanda Ribas, she cannot let Katlyn Chookagian, A, dictate the pace, the range, or take her angles, because we know what Katlyn Chookagian does. She fights to get these decisions, but for Amanda Ribas, she's got to close the distance. She's got to get into the clinch against Chookagian, use that black belt she has in judo. I think between the two, Ribas might have more power in her strikes. Chookagian's really good with that jab. If you close the distance on Katlyn, you take away that point fighting style. You know, you put her on her back, you're probably not going to submit her. Katlyn's got very good defense on the ground. But, you know, and Ribas is also black belt jiu-jitsu. And I kind of like Amanda Ribas in this fight. I think she's the better athlete. I think she's going to be faster. Chookagian will be bigger. There's no question there. She's one of the bigger athletes in this division, and we've seen it. But she's fighting someone who does a really good job at getting in, and that is Amanda Ribas. We know the judo to the ground. As long as Ribas doesn't play the range game, I think she's got a good chance here. I just can't lay minus 180 on Chookagian when she's been fighting also shorter fighters like a Cynthia Calvillo. You got someone, Ribas, who's a little bit longer, knows how to extend her jab, and she can take Chookagian down. So I'm going to take a shot on Amanda Ribas here. I think she's still a top-level prospect. I think this fight gets her over the hump into contender-ish status, and that's what she needs to get done.
Interesting pick there, man. I like it. It's not easy to be picking against Katlyn Chookagian. Just like I said, she beats everybody. There's not basically a champion. So this is I like this pick. And you know what? Maybe odds makers are kind of seeing the same thing as you, because I was a little surprised that the odds weren't a little longer on this one, quite frankly. Okay, let's move to Frank Camacho versus Manuel Torres. Frank Camacho has had a rough go in the UFC. He is 2-5. He didn't get a fight in 2021. He's facing Manuel El Loco Torres, who is making his UFC debut coming off the Contender Series. What do we know about El Loco? And this is a closer. We've been talking about some long odds here today. This is a close fight, minus 135 for Torres.
Yeah, look, this for me is a fight maybe stay away from, because as we've seen, there's a little bit of a trend. You can see it on Twitter. A lot of people tend to fade Dana White Contender Series fighters on their first fight because sometimes the level of competition step up is just maybe too much too soon, or they're not ready, or under the bright lights, it changes things. But I can't bet on Frank Camacho either. I think he fights with his head, but the wrong way. And when I mean the wrong way, he doesn't use fight IQ. He uses his head to block punches, and then he gets knocked out. Torres is a good striker. He carries a lot of power here. So if I were to take a side, I know you're going to cringe at that joke, but it's the real deal. Camacho takes too much damage. Got knocked out against Justin James. I didn't like that. Maybe this year off is a good break for him. I'm not a big fan of inactivity, but sometimes guys need that recharge. But if you had to make me play a side here, I would go Torres. I think he is the better striker, and I think carries more power.
Okay, so a slight lean on Torres, but maybe this is one just to watch for our viewers. Okay, let's finish off this main card. It's a pretty fun one, man. Jake Hadley, 25-year-old with some swag out of Birmingham, England, taking on Nascimento, who has more experience, far more experience than the 25-year-old, but he's coming in at plus 180. Hadley was impressive on Dana White Contender Series. He submitted Mitch Raposo, who I think a lot of us in the community think has some potential. Submitted Mitch Raposo and now making his UFC debut. What do we think of him here, though, as a minus 220 favorite?
It's tough when a guy comes off the Contender Series and now he's a 2-1 favorite. I get it with Torres minus 130, but he's fighting a guy, Nascimento, who's got the experience, has a few losses, but hasn't looked bad. He's a pretty solid fighter, too. Just sometimes when you go out there, you just don't show all your skill. So for me, with the Contender Series, Hadley had to come back after the first round and get the sub. Nascimento's not an easy guy to finish, so I think I'm going to go over 2.5 rounds here. Let's see if Hadley's swag continues. Maybe he gets an earlier finish, and I'm wrong here, but I just want to see him get some cage time against a seasoned guy, Nascimento. So for me, this is a safer play to go over 2.5.
All right, that wraps up the main card. Let's get to the parlay that almost hit last weekend. We lost a split decision that Ian, I know, did not agree with. But here, what are we doing with the parlay this weekend in Las Vegas?
All right, so for the parlay, let's start off. Well, Nick Maximov, we haven't gotten to that breakdown yet, but at that minus 380 number, I think his cardio gets him the win there. His wrestling is awesome. Tyra, we had him in the parlay against Candelario last time. Fight got canceled, rescheduled, so we're going to slide him back in there. Davey Grant, we talked about this. We think he gets it done over Smoka. We don't have to worry about a method. Let's just cash him getting the W. And last but not least, and I will be utterly shocked, Brett, if Ryan Spann and Ion Cutelaba goes the distance. So we're going to have them not go the distance here, and a plus 180 payout for the parlay this week.
All right, plus 180 on the parlay. Hopefully we get back on the winning streak with the parlay. Let's move into the prelims, Ian. We got a ton of fights here to talk about beyond the 6 that we're going to see on the main card. I will leave the floor to you. Why don't you walk us through all of your prelim picks on ESPN+.
Absolutely. We're going to go with Andrea Lee over Araujo. I think Andrea Lee has shown a lot of promise in her last few fights. That comeback, that resurgence, more ways to win here. Got to use that range. Michael Johnson over Alon Patrick. Somebody give Michael Johnson a break here. One of those most unlucky fighters in the UFC. I think this is the matchup that finally gets him over the hill. I like Jandiroba over Angela Hill. We all love Angela Hill, but I think the grappling is going to be too much. Tyra inside the distance over Candelario, and Maxima Petrosky. It's going to be a wrestling match. Let's just hope Petrosky's gas doesn't go out too early, and over 2.5 rounds there.
Yep, and as you see, 7:30 Eastern for those prelims. They are on ESPN Plus and ESPN2. One I want to follow up with you on is this Jandiroba fight versus Hill. Obviously, she's shown some value and some promise as an underdog before, but you think the grappling is going to be the difference? Explain a little bit more about how you think that fight's going to go.
Well, look, styles make fights, and Angela Hill always comes there prepared. And it's not that her takedown defense hasn't gotten better. It's just that her striking is always what gets her wins. In the fight against Amanda Lemos, a lot of us thought she won, but there was no threat of the takedowns there. In fact, she was the one doing the wrestling. But when she has fought grapplers that have good enough striking to make it a threat, that's where she really falls short. She's not terrible off her back. She's better than what she was. But Jandiroba is one of the best female grapplers on the planet. You know, when she fought Mackenzie Dern, we were excited. We wanted to see all the exchanges, and we did see that. The thing about Jandiroba that's been impressive, and we saw it in the Amanda Ribas fight, was her striking has gotten better. So for me, I think her striking is more than suitable to compete with Angela Hill on the feet. It will make her takedowns less predictable, which makes it more dangerous. And once that fight gets to the floor, Jandiroba is just one of those people that is very top-heavy with their pressure control, very creative with her submissions. And I think that's where Angela Hill is going to have a lot of problems here. So I do like Jandiroba in this fight.
All right, wonderful breakdown of that strawweight fight, Ian. That brings us to a part of the show that I hope Drake is watching, man. It's right here for you. 4 and 5 last week on Ian's Best Bets. It gives you a chance to win back some of that $500,000 you lost on Gaethje. Where are we going for the best bets?
Main event, over 2.5 rounds. Repeat for Drake, over 2.5 rounds. If I lose, don't listen to me, but I'm kidding. Michael Johnson, I love this play. This is actually, Brett, my favorite play on the entire card. I think Michael Johnson, he fought Justin Gaethje, was winning until he got rocked. The Josh Emmett fight was winning until he got one punch knocked out. This is a fight where Alon Patrick, I don't think, threatens anywhere. Michael Johnson's my favorite play of the night. I am saying it right here, right now. And last but not least, Verna Jandiroba over Angela Hill. That line has kept going. It will keep going up, so take it now. And those are going to be our best bets.
I love it when you give that advice of get in on that as soon as possible, right? Because that line is going to look different come Saturday night. All right, that is it for us. You can watch the fights on ESPN Plus at ESPN2, and you can watch this show on YouTube every single week. In fact, we will be back next week to preview UFC Fight Night. Holly Holm taking on Ketlin Vieira. But until then, win yourself some money on Saturday. We will see you next time.